Hey, this is Brian here. I want to just show you some strategies in Fusion. So I'm going to try to design this, not design, sorry, build this plate that Oliver Grant designed. It's for bagels. So the first trick here is to actually figure out what size is a bagel. So I took some notes, I got my calipers out and measured, and I'm going to do all this in the form environment. All right, so I'm going to create a torus, which is basically a bagel. And I like to click on the bottom plane just to set it. And I always like to click in this dead center. It's easier to align things if you have a center. So this measurement doesn't matter so much right now because I can pull all these little sliders and create my bagel kind of form. And I'm going to look at this now as I'm kind of getting something that looks more or less like a bagel. It looks a little tall, so I'll squish it. Now I'll start entering some dimensions in here. So this is 57. I can also do it over here in this little palette, so maybe this will be easier. So diameter 1 is 57. That's the total diameter of the torus. And in my case, I think it is. Actually, let's find out. 107 is what we came up with. And then the diameter of the kind of cross section of one of these tubes, it came up with 43. So let's try that. So sometimes if you move this up and down, you can see where what's changing over here. So 43. So it looks to me as though what's happening is it's the diameter, the center diameter. I measured the to the outside, so I have my bagel here, so just bear with me for a second. And I'll do a guesstimate to measure me 70. Let's call it 70. So that first one we'll do 70. Return. And so there's basically the bagel. I'm going to make this a little bit more organic later, but I want the kind of more pure form to begin with. So I want to just measure this real quick here to make sure that this roughly matches. So it's 113 and I had 107, close enough. And again, close enough just because it's an organic shape that changes. So I want a kind of average bagel. So first step I'm going to do is change my filter. Yeah, so this threw me off for a long time. Under select and selection filters, there's all these different choices, and you can click this select all and it selects all, and you click it again and it'll go off. And so I'm going to just start with them all on. But sometimes you can't choose something and you're trying to figure out, go look and select and see if you can figure if something's off. All right, so if I double click on this, and I'm going to go down and copy this and then paste it. There's some other ways to do this, but all right, so now I got two bodies in here, so there's 1 and 2. And I'm going to do one more. So I'm just going to paste again. So there's 3 bodies. And so one of these is going to be the bagel, and the other one's going to be the 2-part dish. So I'll start with the first one. I'm going to name this B-A-G-E-L. I think that's the right spelling. Body 2 is going to be dish. And you don't have to name these, but sometimes it gets a little confusing on which part's which. I'm just going to go D2. This is dish part 2. All right, so because these are all stacked on top of each other, I'm going to turn one off. And I'm going to move this. So I'm going to say modify move. And see, I could do this here. I could say create copy. So I could have done that instead of doing my other move. But you have to click that before you actually move it. And now I got to turn on one of my other ones. So 2 bagels are going to sit side by side. So this is why I needed my measurements. So I'm going to give a little bit of wiggle room. And again, you can enter dimensions and stuff, but at this point I'm just going visually. So, so there is dish 1 and dish 2. And actually I should have done this part first before I moved it and copied it, but that's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one grid and then hold down Shift and double click, and that gives me a full loop, and I'm going to delete that. and it looks pretty weird, but just bear with me. And now I'm going to actually just double click on this line and delete that. And so that's kind of the bottom of my dish. And then I'm going to do the same over here. Do this, and I could do that. Let's just do this the other way around. I'll delete this one first, delete, and then delete this outer one. So click one, run right next to it, shift, double click, and delete. Okay, so I've got this, and I think what I want to do, again, I should have probably did all these operations to one of them and then copied it over. So maybe I'll do that. Modify, I am going to edit form. I'm going to give it, because it's flaring out. Well, just trying to decide my strategy. Let's try this. Let's just actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bridge between these two to get this kind of blended shape. So first I'm going to delete all these pieces. And then I'm going to try my bridge tool and see if this works. So double click on this side, double click on that side. Make sure these arrows are pointing roughly in the same direction. And let's do, this is how many faces in between. I'm just going to do 2. I like 2 because you get one center face that becomes your symmetry line. So let's do that. Let's turn on symmetry now that we've got this. This will make things a lot easier. So I'm going to mirror internal, click 2 sides of that symmetry line, say OK. And now I've got the beginnings of this, but you can see the bottom looks pretty funky. So that's why I like this line here. So let's go back over to edit. And whoops. So I've got symmetry in one direction, but I can also do it in the other direction. So let's go symmetry this way too. So now I've got 2 axes of symmetry. So if I move one line, it should move on the opposite side just as well. And I noticed it's kind of bubbled out on the bottom a little bit, so I got to figure out a strategy to get that flat. So I'm going to go to box mode, and this will kind of show me what the basic structure is. Maybe we'll pull this in a little bit. And it seems like this one should go down a little bit. Again, there's always multiple ways to do stuff. Let's take a look at this. So Control 3 gives me the softy mode, and yeah, I don't like that extra bump in there. Let's pull this up more, see what happens. Boop. So let's turn on our bagel now, and then we can kind of see. And you see when I deleted the top, it kind of flared out a little bit. That's because there's not very much information on the bottom, very simple surfaces. And so it's trying to figure out what's the best method to do this in. But now, so if I grab this whole top edge, for example, and pull up with modify and option, pull up a little bit more of an edge, then you'll see it starts heading more upward like it originally was. But might want to flare this out a little bit too. No, this is, if I try to just enlarge this, you can see it's kind of enlarging, not exactly the same all the way around. So I'd have to kind of do a little bit of fussing. So this would have been better to do that operation before I duplicated it. But the nice thing about this is that what I'm going to get at is that instead of building one perfect model, you build a whole bunch of models really quick, and then you can kind of see which one is the best, giving you the best results. So let's just finish this one up. So I'm just going to thicken this. I think from the drawing I saw, this was not as tall. So let's move that back down. Let's thicken it. So take the whole thing, modify, thicken, And here I probably should have figured out a dimension, we'll say 6 millimeters. And in this case, it looks like it's not doing the right thing, but it's showing you the box mode in 6 millimeters, and then that arrow showing you the direction. So I did want to go away from the bagel, so that's good. And then there's one more trick, is that the edges I can have sharp or soft, and I want to do soft because I think that makes it nicer. So let's just hit go. And then that kind of rounds off these edges. So basically this is kind of done, except for let's pick a material for this. So for a minute, let's throw just white paint enamel on this. Copy this one more time, because I'm going to make another one from this, and I want to, so I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it. And you'll see another bagel number 1 popped up. And bagel, let's turn this one off, and this original bagel is going to be our kind of more organic-y bagel. So I'm going to, I like to just give a little bit of randomness so it doesn't look so engineered. So first thing, I'm going to kind of flatten the top a little bit, because I notice the bagels tend to flatten out a little bit, actually even kind of curve out. The bottom's a little flatter because it's cooked in a pan. And then the interior was a little bit asymmetrical, so I'm just going to use this tool to kind of grab some of these things, and you could grab lines or edges or whatever. And I'm just trying to introduce some randomness, and maybe I'll grab 2 by holding down Shift and kind of squish this over, because at the middle kind of, in fact, let's grab this whole thing and we're going to shrink it a little bit with this center loop, and that kind of tightens up the little central bagel divot. And again, let's just go a little wacky here, and probably on the full exterior as well. I'm going to give it some organic nature to it. Okay, so let's stop there for a minute. And here's where finding the right appearance, they don't really have food item, you know, they've got metals and glass and stuff, all this engineering, wonderful stuff. But I noticed in, there's miscellaneous and other, let me turn the paint back off. And for some reason, the Wacom tablet on these folders always, whoops, I didn't want mirror. Miscellaneous. One of them has, they kind of duplicate each other, but wax is what I'm looking for. I like wax because it's got this, it's called subsurface scattering. It actually, the light goes into it a little bit and penetrates, and then it gives a little bit of luminosity. And it's, you know, if you painted a bagel, it would not have the same look as a real cooked bagel. So now I'm just trying to get a color that looks kind of bagely. It's got a little bit of yellow, maybe a little more color. I got a bagel on my desk I'm kind of looking at. Maybe a little more red. And of course, this is just a proxy. Let's just go ahead and render this up and see what it looks like. So I'm going to go into my render environment, and there's a couple settings I like to, so if you click this little ball in the corner of the room, I like to actually use the environment, not a solid color. It gives a little bit more realism. And then you can go into the environment library and choose, and I personally like this warm light one. You're like a photographer now trying to take a nice picture. So this one that says position is positioning the lighting. And so you see as I move this around, I get some interesting reflections and stuff. So I kind of like that little warm glow. You're like maybe right in there. Let's see, keep going. Yeah, so you're basically going 360. So get a nice, good angle, and then change the kind of environment. And when you tip this thing down, you actually see the environment. So let's do this again. You see there's the warm light going by, and then there's this big grid of, we're going to go back to the other side. Where'd it go? There, this big grid of light, cool light. So let's go back one more time and get that kind of cool grooviness. And then it doesn't look that impressive until you do this in-canvas render with little green thing. And this might take a while because that material that I chose for the bagel, it just gets sharper and sharper as you go. But I wanted to cut that bagel open and put one on the other side. So let's stop this for a minute. So I got to hit that little stop icon, go back into design, and once we finished this form, we can't edit the mesh anymore, but that's okay because we're gonna slice this in half. So first, I'm gonna hide the dish because this will slice everything in half that's visible, and turn this sideways. And again, I'm gonna try this with a line. So I'm gonna create a sketch, and I'm gonna draw it on this plane. And the reason is because I want this to also be a little bit organic. So I'll just use a spline tool, and I'll do a really kind of crappy, sloppy cut. And say OK. And finish that sketch, and then I'm going to use that as a slicing tool. So now I'm going to go modify, split body, and it says body to split. So we select that, and then it says splitting tool. We select this, and we want to extend the splitting tool. So it's going to go all the way through there. Good. And so now it's split this bagel, and now I can take this top half and move it. Oops. Yeah, also when you're selecting stuff, don't select the object and then try to move it. It's better to select it in the browser, and then it gives you kind of more of a generic straight up and down manipulation tool. So, all right, so now I gotta turn the dish back on that I've split this and figure out where, so I'm gonna move this back so it's centered. It looks like it needs to go up a little bit, and we'll say okay. All right, so now again, this texture is totally wrong. I'm gonna do just, again, this is a proxy, so now I'm gonna pick wax natural, and instead of bodies or components, I'm gonna click on faces and just drag this to that face, and this same one to that face. And this looks a little greenish, so I'll go in here and warm that up a little bit, lighten it up a little bit. Again, I'm just kind of looking for, so what I probably would do in the end is Photoshop a real bagel in here, but it helps to have the scale and the size correct, but we'll get little subtle reflections and light casting from this bagel. And then if I have a picture, I can before I even render this up, I can try to match the lighting and whatnot. So let's close this now. And of course, there's some smear or something on here. So I would actually create that in the form environment again. So maybe I'm going to create a new form environment. So I'm going to say, did I already do it? Yeah. So I'm back in the form environment. These guys I can't edit because they're, if you look on the timeline, that's a different event that I did those first ones. But I want this to be in this new one because I already split it. So let's try something here. Let's do a face. This is going to be a little tricky. I'm going to say object snap. And face is like I'm drawing the little grid of, so you have to start with a full square. And then I like to use this second one. This allows me just to grab one edge and then do two more hits. One edge, two more hits. And I'm going to kind of, let's see, not really sure where I'm going with this, but and once I finish box mode, you'll see that it gets a little bit more, boom, it curves off and everything. And you can't really see it because the bagel's in the way. So I'll double click on this. And now I'm going to use that same thing I did before. I used options and edit form. There we go. I don't know what I was doing wrong. So I'm just trying to make this little blobby schmear. And I've got to bury it a little bit into the bagel. It's okay. Back to move. And I would copy this and make more of these and stuff. But again, let's give it this a little bit more organic kind of nature to it. A little more kind of weird and wobbly. And like I said, I kind of go between editing lines and edges. So let's pull this one way out. Maybe we or you can even do a point. So let's smush this one way down so it gets thinner over here. It's a little thicker at the top. And then I can even go in and let's do, just because we're here, let's subdivide this one little section. So now that's 4. So this one's going to have some more detail in this one little area. So I'm just going to push something up, push something down. Or actually, yeah, let's rotate. So again, I should really look at a picture of some actual schmear on something and see if I could get a little bit more closer to that. I'm just making this up right now. Okay, so let's finish that. And then this is kind of interesting. When it turns this kind of golden color, it means I didn't actually put a bottom to this smear. It's just a surface. So I need to, in my surface tools, I need to flip this. So I'm going to reverse the normal because the color won't show up if I'm looking at the wrong side. It defaults to this kind of metallic-y colors. I'm in the purple environment, which is form. And when I'm done, I always have to click this finish form button. And you'll notice that the cream cheese is different colors. And I can't, this is something that was confusing at first, but let's go to appearance. So the other cream cheese was, I think, wax. So if I go to try to apply this, it won't apply because the surface is inside out. So this is what I was talking before. I have to go to the, we were in solids, and now I have to go to surface, modify, reverse normal. And that insides it out. That orange color or gold color is always the inside. Okay, oops. Yeah, now so one of them looks like it took the wax because it was just on the inside. And the other one I still have to do. So one more time, modify. And I can get appearance from, I think, pretty much any menu. So let's go over here. Boom. And then I'm going to change the dish. It looks a little too big for the bagels. But before I do that, I'm going to do some quick modifications here. So this is like where you can spend hours in the materials, but there are a few that are pretty good proxies that one of them is leather. And so let's go, I forget where that is, leather and cloth. For food stuff, you can kind of fake leather into a lot of different scenarios. These little arrows here, I mean, you just double click on them and they'll load the material. So let's put this up here first. I'm going to do something tricky. This was my the outside of my bagel, and this is my leather. And if I hold down Option and drag this over there, or right on top of that, that will change the whatever's in that color. So just one color is fine, but if you've got a, now the one thing is scale is always off if you're trying to do food, so you can kind of see it's got this really tight texture. But if I scale it way up, it gives a kind of uneven variation. It's got a bump map, so it'll give it a little bit of three-dimensional surface texture too. And roughness, I'm going to turn roughness up so it's not so reflective. Maybe reflectance down, I don't know. Plastic, opaque, translucent, transparent, textured. I think it's a random. Let's see. Let's put this up there, and we'll do skin too. So that top surface of the bagel just looked way too smooth. So of course this is the wrong color. I'm going to change this first just because, just so we're not so startled. We want something a little more kind of, it'd be nice if they showed you what this color was, but let's try that. Okay, now I'm going to do faces again, and I'll just drag this over. So the scale of the texture may be what is going on. There, I start to see it. Okay. There we go. Can you see? It's got like a little bumpy pattern to it. Scale, rotation, roughness. Again, we probably want this pretty rough. So let's scale. The scale is really weird too. It jumps really quick. So I sometimes just have to put in numbers. So if I zoom way in here, I can start to see. I just want this a little bit less. But if you see how it jumped really quick. Maybe down there, 75. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now I need to apply that also over to this other one. So now I'm going to make sure that's faces is selected. And sometimes you might, this is one big face, so this actually is nice, but sometimes you have to select multiple faces. All right, let's close that. And then let's give it a quick table surface because we're just rendering on the environment, and sometimes throwing a table on there is nice. So in that case, I'm out of my form environment, and I can see that the purple little square is way back there. That's where I was editing all that stuff. I do want to make this a little smaller, but well, let's go back there real quick. Okay, so I'm going to go back and edit this original, and maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to try stretching the distance between the two out a little bit. So in that case, and you'll see that there's some like ghosty stuff happening. Like I can't actually edit that bagel. This is the original one, which also you notice if I click on anything once, it highlights it in the thing so I can find where that is. So there's the bagel before it was cut. And so I want to turn off all these things. This ghost body is just showing me in the future. So I talk about this timeline like past and the future. I went to the way back into the past. This is done in the future, so I can't really affect it. So what I wanted to do was just select this whole group here, and I want to go back into selections, and I want to make sure I select through because I want the bottom selected as well. So I'm just kind of rotating up and dragging. If you drag left to right or right to left, so you know this one that's within it is captured, and then the other direction, anything you're touching. So now I want to go over to edit. And so now I'm going to have to move my bagels too because because it's centered, as I drag these apart, they're going away from the center. And maybe that looks better. And actually, if I note here, I drag this 10 millimeters, and I'm just going to round that off to 10. And then I know I have to move my bagels 10 millimeters each. So that looks a little better. Let me just shrink the whole thing because the bagel is kind of, I'm not sure if this is going to work. This is what I like about this though, is I just do a lot of experimenting. I don't actually sometimes know where I'm going in the beginning. And I try a bunch of stuff and I get some results. And then I may rebuild it based on what I did, some clues. Yeah, that looks a little better. So I basically stretched the two apart and I just shrunk it down. And because the torus is kind of this nice even, and let's go 0.8. Oh, maybe that's too much. Let's go 8.5. All right, let's try that. It looks like I'm kind of back to the center where the bagels were, and then the thing's a little bit smaller. So that was a quick fix, right? And I got one more thing I'm going to try. I'm going to try a decal on top of this surface, but let's see what. So I'm going to go back. Oh no, I'm going to finish this form, and these little arrows over here. You can scrub across the timeline and see like what did this look like when I was at this phase, and edit there, and then scrub back. These little arrows will jump. This one jumps all the way to the end of the timeline, so that's kind of where I am. And now I got to double check. It looks like my bagels are a little low or my bowl is a little high. So I am going to move either them up or this down, and that's just one thing. So let's just move that down. And now I'm going to go back into solids because I'm not really dealing with surfaces. So I just want to deal with this dish. So again, I selected it just to find where it was, but then I'm going to actually select it in the browser. When I go to move it, it gives me this, this move tool is kind of centered to the main axes. And so I'll move this down. And for some reason, it looks like one bagel is higher than the other. So I'll just move, I'll get it to this one because it's got more pieces, and then I'll move that one down. And it doesn't really matter where the bottom is. It'll render it like the lowest most item will be the ground plane. So let's do an inspection. And so if I click inspect and then I click this center plane, that'll give me a cross section. And now I can work in cross section mode. And I could see maybe when I shrunk this thing, it's not quite right. See how this is getting a little tight in there. So I probably will go back and rebuild this a little bit better, but this was my first pass to figure out what I want. So again, I'm gonna go bagel number 2, which is over here. Now I can really see kind of where I want that. And it's okay if it's a little bit intersecting, you know, that's fine because the bagel probably would conform. This one here, let's grab, I think these 3 pieces here are the cream cheese. And is this, no, that's bagel 2. Bagel 1, no, bagel, yeah. So I was holding shift click and then I'm going to click the move tool again. So I got all those things. And now I'm going to use this one here and scoot it over a little bit so it's a little bit more centered and down. And again, you know, my bagel's got a big hole in the center. A lot of them have the holes almost close up. So it's not like I need to really rebuild this bowl per se, but I could flatten it out a little bit. Maybe I'll do that. All right, so let's just do that. So I'm gonna leave my section on. I'm gonna go back in time, edit this one more time, and I'm just gonna double click any one square to select the whole thing. Go up to edit form, and I'm gonna use this one. This one's, I'm just smushing it down a little bit, but in reality it's squishing the thickness a little bit uneven. So I should do this before I thicken it, but this will be okay again for just the, I like to think of these as kind of like foam models. We're just kind of experimenting. And all right, so I did that, and then I'm going to finish form. It'll go back in time to the end. So I want the dish, and I'm going to move it up till it hits those bagels roughly. Somewhat realistic. And now proportionately, I think that looks a lot better. So now there's one more thing I'm going to do. So this inspection, which cut this in half, that's not a, it's just a temporary thing. And so in analysis, there's all these things like draft and zebra analysis and stuff. Those are in there. So I could just turn off analysis. And oh, it's going to make a table. So I'm down to here. So now I'm going to, I'll do a sketch just to show you how to do that. So I'm going to create a sketch, and I'm going to use this lower plane here, and let's just draw a big rectangle that kind of encompasses this. And I like to, this is going to be like a corner of a table, so I kind of like to, you know, build a big surface but keep it kind of more or less at the corner. So that's just a big square. Finish that. And I could do this other ways, but I just want to show you how to do a sketch. And now I'm going to extrude, and I'm going to grab this and bring it down. And you notice something weird's happening with my bagel is this table I just drew was on top. That sketch plane was way up high, and I drew this table on top, and now it's thinking I want to cut this. And let me move this over center. But I don't want to cut it. I want to make this a new body. I want a new body. Okay. And I probably should have made this table as a new component anyway, but that's fine. So now here, I select on it once just to see where it is. It's over here. Grab my move tool. And now this I'm just going to kind of do visually. Like I said, I'm going to move it up because I'm assuming I'm going to shave a little bit off the bottom of that dish. So it sits flat. So that looks, I think, good. Yeah. And then I like to do one more double operation is to make this look real. I'm going to give each of these corners a bit of a radius because this is a table. And actually, in reality, I don't need to do these 2 back ones because I won't see them. But, so 1, 2, 3, 4. And then this is, again, where I like, you just push that little arrow and then just visually look at where do I want that. Let's say that looks good. And now once I've done that operation, the second one, which is this little top edge, all automatically connects because this tangent chain is on. And so that's good. And that gives it just this little bit more of realism. And then also got to give the table some sort of material. So I'm going to double click on this and turn the scale down a little bit so it's more. And that should be probably pretty shiny. It's a little busy, but go back to my render environment. Boom. Yeah, see now I'm getting that nice hot reflection on the marble. And you'll notice I've got this kind of, instead of saying aspect ratio 4:3, I'm going to say viewport, which will give me this whole thing so now I can zoom in and get a much bigger render. And now you can see some really nice light on the cream cheese. See a little bit of the texture happening. There's some interesting label stuff we're gonna have to fix. I'll show you that in a minute. What else am I doing? Focal length. Oh yeah, so I'm gonna do depth of field too, because this gives it a nice effect. So it says it's only visible when I'm ray tracing because I'm not ray tracing yet. And here's the final render. We're gonna do another step in the second phase of this, photoshopping food.